if I understand correctly, if these, under the economic assumption that these dollars will be utilized appropriately, that they'll be spread throughout the state, that it'll lead to a enhanced workforce, more educated workforce, there's actually an economic gain that could be experienced by the state of Oregon. Can you take a moment and discuss that? You shared it with our subcommittee.
I believe you're referring to what we call our OTIM runs. We have an Oregon tax incidence model, which without getting into the details of it, it's a model that we've had for 20 years, and it's not what we use for our revenue impact statements. Our revenue impact statements are what we call our static estimates. And so we take those static estimates for large policies. This tool is really for large policy, not a small credit, for example. And then we take that input and we put it into the model. And then the idea there is to find out what the economic responses are to those change in taxes and then how the money is spent. And that is based on economic literature and assumptions and generally accepted parameters for the model. And there's a whole process there. And we've used this model for a number of years, and we have a standard assumption that we put in the new tax system, and then after 5 years, we basically move from one equilibrium to the next, and then we can find out what the change is, or an estimated difference in personal income, employment, wages, investment, those kinds of high-level metrics between an economy, our current economy, and an economy with the changes. And I believe you're referring to an aspect of that modeling that we've done off and on over the past 10 years, where we make assumptions about the spending side. And this is where, given the nature of this increase and all of the funds having a direct use going into education, theory would suggest that if the money is spent appropriately and it's spent well and it's spread throughout the economy, there would be an economic gain to that. And the time period for that is longer than this normal model. So it might be 10 to 12 years because most of the money's going to early education and pre-K to kindergarten, if I got the terminology right.
Pre-K to 12.
Pre-K 12. I'm not sure what I said then.
Pre-K and kindergarten, just kindergarten.
Between preschool and kindergarten, 3 months.
And so along those lines, today's high schoolers would get some benefit, but then the younger the kids are today, the more benefit they would get over time. And then basically the human capital within the state would be better off, and the better human capital leads to a more productive workforce, leads to higher wages, and then more of that payback. And I believe that's the positive feedback that you were referring to, that we had a version of the model that showed that.
Follow-up question.
Follow-up?
And I think it's important that we note that, part of our goal as a state, I would believe, is to have a better, well-educated workforce. And I think there's some benefit long-term, obviously, if we achieve those results. I do want to ask another economic question. If I understand correctly, there's a concern among business about stacking, and that's a very legitimate issue, very legitimate. I understand, though, part of the reason that we've introduced personal income tax reductions is to try and assist in addressing that issue. And again, in the subcommittee, there were runs made, and we were able to see that households will actually economically gain as a result of these decreases. We know there's going to be an increase on business, decrease on the personal income, but the result of that is that households will actually have a little more spending money in their pocket. Can you address that issue?
I think that's another aspect of the gains from investing in the human capital. And within this model, there are 9 households. And the households, rather than just a total gain in the economy, it reflects it by the household levels. So we have 9 different households of different income ranges. And it showed the gains for each of those based on those assumptions about the money being spent in improving human capital in the state.
I want to make sure I'm really clear on this. And so with the reduction in the personal income tax by 0.25% and the formula that's been created under the activity tax, a household could actually expect to have a few more dollars on average in their pocket.
Yeah, this is a very high-level model. It's not people's names and addresses and how people are going to
I thoroughly understand on average.
high-level group of the households that make up the different levels here and benefiting from the investment based on that assumption, yeah.
Go ahead.
Need to be selfish and think about District 57. If I understand the new language as it relates to cooperatives, let's just say a wheat farmer who is going to sell their wheat to the cooperative, who then is going to blend it with other wheat growers and sell it to Vietnam, pick a country. That wheat sold to the cooperative would not be subject to the activity tax.
Correct. And the prior version, this is the basis for the tax is activity in Oregon. And the business is benefiting from Oregon's economy, selling goods and services in Oregon. So exports are not part of that tax base. And we had one version of language that partially got at the cooperative piece, but there were some feedback on that. And so now the language that we have in here now mirrors the language that's been in statute that really focuses on the corporate minimum tax. So that's brought into here.
Selfish and just talk about District 57 here. So what if I have a cooperative of potato growers who take their commodity and sell it to Weston, who makes it into a French fry and sells that French fry in Argentina? Would those potato growers, knowing that they've sold it to a cooperative, would they be subject to the activity tax?
So where's the language?
66, line 17.
So the language that we have in here on page 66, line 17 through 18. So I'm trying to think through the exact example you gave her. The language here refers to doing business with or for members of the ag co-op. So I think they would be exempt from the tax.
Representative Smith, co-chairs. So this does mirror the corporate minimum language in 317.090. So the transactions within the co-op, with and among members of the co-op, those would be excluded. And then really the ultimate sales that are made by the cooperative and that are outside of the state are not going to be receipts they wouldn't be sourced to this state in any case, because it's essentially Oregon sales, so mirroring the language for the corporate minimum, but not using the term Oregon sales, which is the term in 317.090.
Oregon are cooperatives that sell power, electric cooperatives. Would that be subject to the activity tax?
I believe so. What we're referring to here are agricultural cooperatives. So I don't believe those would qualify as an ag co-op.